Holy Toyota. So if you have not yet heard about the GR Corolla, you must live in rural Nova Scotia in a cabin in the woods far, far from civilization, because this thing has lit the goddamn internet on fire. This thing has seriously blown up, and I think it's gotten more hype than the Supra relaunch ever did. In my opinion, rightfully so. Now, Toyota has the potential with these two cars to absolutely slay the market segment, but I'm going to tell you why they're going to fuck it up. So what's the GR Corolla? The GR Corolla and its predecessor, the GR Yaris, is Toyota's relaunch into the rally racing foray. Now, both of these cars are turbocharged, all-wheel drive, hatchback sport compacts. The GR Yaris previously launched worldwide. It's not coming to the States. Some people are really upset about that, but what we are getting is the GR Corolla. Slightly larger platform, 4 doors instead of 2, as well as slightly higher horsepower rating. So, specs on the GR Corolla. We've got a 1.6 liter 3-cylinder. And yes, you heard that right. 3 cylinders. Now, I'll admit, when I first heard this, I was extremely skeptical because when I think of 3 cylinders, I think of this or this. But let me tell you what's different about this 3-cylinder. 300 horsepower, 273 foot-pounds of torque out of 1.6 liters. To back that up, it only comes in a 6-speed manual. Way to go, Toyota. The car weighs in at 3,249 pounds, which is super light by today's standards with all of the modern safety equipment. For reference, that's the exact same weight that the ST-185 weighed in 1990 to 1993. It's got a McPherson front strut setup with a double wishbone rear. We know that is a proven suspension design. It's been on numerous incredibly well-performing track cars. You've got 4 piston calipers in the front, 2 piston in the rear, 18-inch wheels all around, sporting 235s, which is a good deal of rubber for a car this small and light. And from the factory, it is coming with Michelin Pilot PS4s, which is incredibly solid for a factory tire. So let's talk about models you can get the GR Corolla in. They're coming out with what they call the Core, which is really the base model. And then they are coming out with a special Circuit Edition. So this video today is sponsored by us, because YouTube pays us the equivalent of pennies per hour.
Do you love the 80s shitboxes more than life itself? And when your friends and family question why you love the blocky designs, mediocre performance, and third-rate amenities, your only response is made in the 80s, loved by the ladies? You love 80s music so much that you once threw your stereo out the window at freeway speeds because someone changed the channel? Did you peak in the 3rd grade because that was the only period in your life where mullets were culturally acceptable? Then you're one of us, and we made these shirts with more neon and 80s super goodness just for you.
Down below, there's a link to boostrodeo.com. Please go give it a look. Every single dollar from that purchase will go right back into making content, making more merch, or funding R&D for parts. So the Circuit Edition gets you a special hood with more aggressive vents to relieve heat. You get a forged carbon fiber roof, which is super cool. I'm not aware of any other mass-produced cars that are doing that. You get a rally-inspired roof spoiler on the rear of the hatch. You also get special edition seats that are suede trimmed and have a bunch of red accents in them. Within those 2 models, there are 3 different packages that can be added onto them. There is a cold weather package, which has heated seats and mirrors. There's a tech package, which comes with premium sound, wireless charging, navigation, all those cool gadgets to make life easy. And then the biggest one is the performance package, which gets you Torsen front and rear differentials. Now, the cool thing about the Circuit Edition, it comes standard with the performance package. So right out of the box, you are getting those Torsen front and rear differentials, which are going to be wildly helpful on the track. All right, so big thing. Let's talk performance. So what are we seeing out of this engine initially? So one of the first things that jumped out when researching the G16E GTS motor, which is found in the GR Corolla, is this thing's got an open deck block design. A closed deck design is typically much more rigid and you get a lot less movement at high power levels. So this potentially could be a bit of a problem for such a small little 3-cylinder that is pushing out so much power. However, look at the size of those sleeves. Like, those things are absolutely massive. Here's a couple other open deck engines that are renowned for their power capabilities. Now, on the other hand, one big advantage that open deck designs have is because you have coolant circulating all the way around that cylinder sleeve, you get much better cooling potential. Given that this engine is an incredibly tiny package at 1.3 liters, pumping out a really big horsepower number, it's going to generate a lot of heat. So that cooling potential could be a huge asset to this engine, and might have been why Toyota specifically chose this design. I'm usually a huge proponent of closed deck engines for big power figures, but looking at this sleeve design, my first thoughts are that Toyota actually made a really smart design decision here, and that this engine is going to be really robust and we're not going to have any issues with lifting the head or with block rigidity. All right, so let's talk about what type of aftermarket performance we're seeing out of this engine initially. Now, the GR Corolla has not yet been released, so no one has got those in their hands to begin tuning on them, but the GR Yaris has been available overseas, and fortunately, a couple people have already been playing with them. So one of the most notable is HKS Tuning out of Japan. Now, if you're not familiar with HKS, they are one of the Japanese tuning powerhouses from back in the day. They have built almost every major Japanese sports car that has come out of Japan for the last 30 years. They are one of my absolute favorite legacy brands, so I am super stoked to see them latching onto this platform and doing a bunch of R&D initially. I'm excited to see where they can take it, but the initial stuff looks super promising. So HKS was able to pull 375 horsepower on pump gas out of this engine with a completely stock internals. Now, just for good measure, they decided to throw a nitrous kit on that and bumped it up to 475 horsepower on a completely stock internal motor. Now, obviously, this motor had a lot of supporting mods. They changed the exhaust, the intake, new turbo kit, new fuel system to support all that power. But it's incredible that this is on a factory bottom end, and they didn't even have to do any head work to improve flow, like a port job, valve springs, or cams. But wait, there's more. Leave it to the Aussies to show up even HKS. So out of Australia, these guys have already pulled 472 horsepower on 36 PSI running E85 out of a relatively stock internal engine. Now they did similar things: exhaust, turbo kit, intercooler, intake, supporting fuel system obviously for E85, and they did also have to change the valve springs to support that number. But it is incredible to see that they're already pulling 150 horsepower per cylinder out of this tiny little engine. Couple that with the 6-speed gearbox and what is looking to be an incredibly capable all-wheel drive system. At those power levels, at 3,250 pounds, this car is going to be an absolute handful and a total animal on the track. So speaking of the all-wheel drive system, one of the things I'm really excited about is the power distribution ability. So Toyota has already come out and said that this all-wheel drive system will be able to distribute power at anywhere from a 50-50 front to rear all the way to a 30-70 front to rear split. Now that is awesome. 50-50 is ideal in most situations for optimal grip, but that 70-30 is going to give the ability for this thing to push really incredibly out of corners and induce some oversteer. And you also know there's going to be some fucking rad all-wheel drive dominance. And having Torsen Lsd Differentials front and rear with the performance package or the circuit is going to make this car even better. Torsen differentials are known for their handling characteristics. They behave really, really well on a track in most situations. The one downside is they're typically not as strong as a clutch pack type LSD. However, in this case, HKS beat the crap out of this thing on the track. They did a lot of hard clutch kicks and drifting in it, and the Aussie guys have already put this thing through numerous drag racing launches, and it's held up just fine. So it's looking like both the 6-speed and the all-wheel drive system are plenty strong so far. So let's talk about the one thing that a ton of people want to know: price. Now, Toyota has not released any official numbers yet, unfortunately, but there's a lot of speculation going around. So the consensus seems to be, and I feel like this is a really realistic number, is that the core editions are going to come in right at that mid 30,000 mark. Obviously, as you add on packages, those will get more expensive, with the special circuit edition coming in at over $40,000. I could easily see this being a $42,000 to $45,000 car equipped with that package. Sounds like a lot to a lot of people, but unfortunately, inflation is just ridiculous, especially on new cars right now. So everything is incredibly expensive. Also, if we compare this to some of the previous sport compact all-wheel drives that were in the market, it's really not that far off. So first, let's look at the Ford Focus RS, which was last made in 2018. That car came in at $36,900 MSRP, right there in line with the speculation on where the core is going to come in at. Now, look at the STI. The 2020 STI was $36,900 as well. So I'm sensing kind of a trend here in this market. The Lancer Evolution, which was last made in 2015, came in between $33,000 and $37,000 depending on which options and package you chose. And keep in mind that was 6 years ago. And lastly, in 1990, the Celica All-Track, which was the GT4 edition that was released in the United States, came in at a whopping $21,000. Now this was wildly expensive for any of the previous generation of Celicas, which were typically an economy front-wheel drive car. But this all-wheel drive edition, that's the equivalent of $46,000 today, which is actually a bit more than I'm expecting the Circuit Edition to come in at. So even at those price points, this car really isn't unreasonable, and I think Toyota will have absolutely no problem selling. There's already people sprinting to dealerships to get on waiting lists for these things, and let's face it, there is a group of enthusiasts with just way too much money out there who will pay whatever the hell Toyota asks for this thing, including the insane dealer markups that are sure to ensue. So I am a huge Toyota enthusiast, but I try to be unbiased and honest on these things. It was no secret that I was not a fan of the A90 Supra. I'm still not that excited about that car, though it has proven to be a little bit better than I initially thought. Besides the A70 and A80 Supras, the GT4 Celicas were one of my absolute favorite Toyotas and favorite cars of all time, to be honest. I initially was not all that excited about the rebranding to Gazoo Racing and Toyota ditching the TRD heritage that they've had so long within their performance cars and their race teams. So far, I'm incredibly impressed with this car. I'm happy to see Toyota using the GR-4 branding as a throwback and a homage to that GT4 heritage they had back in the Group A and Group B Rally Series days. I think that is really fitting, and so far I think this car wholeheartedly lives up to deserving that badge of honor. So I've talked about all the positives, and if you can't tell, I am personally really excited about this car. Let's talk about why Toyota is going to screw this up. Production numbers. So Toyota just recently released their planned production numbers for this car, and it sucks. For the 2023 model year, they are planning to release 8,500 units worldwide, 6,600 in the US. Now to put that in comparison, Toyota sold 250,000 Corolla sedan and hatchbacks in the US alone last year. Now, granted, this car is going after a drastically different market segment than the standard Corolla, but that still is not a lot. If we compare it to some of the other sport compact all-wheel drives that were previously in the market, for instance, the Ford Focus RS, its total production, there was somewhere between 27,000 and 34,000 cars produced worldwide over the several years that it was made. Ford had really bad numbers on this, but it looks like the 2018 model year, which was the last year of that vehicle being in production, they put out somewhere around 8,400 or 8,500 cars in the US. Now, we look at the Evos. The Evos didn't have that high of production numbers. The Evo 8 ranged between 7,000 units in its highest production year, all the way down to 1.2 thousand between the varying models in North America. So that is definitely not a lot of cars. The 9, they produced about 4,000 per year, and the Evo 10 or X, they only put out 22,000 units total over all the years, and it varied between about 1,600 units and 5,400 units a year. So pretty low production numbers for the US. And if you look at the STI, 2004 to 2007, they were producing between 4,000 and 7,000 a year. But as they got into the later years and the market thinned out with Ford and Mitsubishi both dropping out of that market segment, the STI production numbers actually ramped up quite a bit. From 2016 to 2020, they produced anywhere from 21,000 to 31,000 WRX STIs per year. However, one thing that you have to remember is the Evo went out of production in 2015. The Ford Focus RS was dropped in 2018. Even Subaru has dropped out of this all-wheel drive sport compact market because 2022 they announced that that would be the last year of the STI until they are able to produce a full EV version. This leaves the gate wide open for Toyota to come in and swoop this market segment up. They have a huge opportunity here if they could just produce more than 8,500 cars a year. Some of that may be supply chain difficulties that they are still dealing with all of their markets and all of the models that they currently produce. I can say with absolute certainty, this is the first Toyota that's been produced in 20 years that I would go buy, and that's sad. So given that there's just no competition in the market segment, where it's expected to come in from a price point perspective, and the fact that it's the first 100% born and bred Toyota sports car that we have seen in a long, long time, couple that with the all-wheel drive, the 6-speed manual transmission, the ridiculous performance we're already seeing out of this thing, and the fact that it has 4 doors, so that gives this car a lot more practicality, this thing would sell like beers at a baseball game. The only question is, Toyota, are you going to step up and make enough of these things so we can actually get our hands on one? I sure as hell hope so. Catch you guys later. Focus. God damn it. Let's look at the Fode. God damn, I'm talking like Corey from Kentucky. And think about all the money you'll save because this car won't drink quarts like John Belushi because there's no boxer engine anywhere to be found and it doesn't sound like it's running underwater. Australians, I tell ya, they get crazy down under. I mean, I guess when everything in your country can easily kill you, why shouldn't your car as well?